People sometimes ask me, what's the single most important piece of advice I can give them about being a healthy couple? When it comes to communication, the best advice I've got right out of the gate is listen first. It's in some respects timeless wisdom. We hear again and again that we should be good listeners. But for whatever reasons, in this modern culture, we're not great relational listeners. We can listen for problems. We're great problem-solving listeners. We can listen to deal with things. But when it comes to listening to our significant other, there's some skill to practice. I talk about reflective listening. It's one of the most effective techniques. But today's video is about putting listening at the start of a communication. Listen first. Old truisms, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we talk. That's actually not bad counsel. So much depends on listening, both negative and positive. Negative in the sense that when we don't listen, lots of things spin out from that. Positive that when we do listen, how many things we don't have to deal with, how many problems and issues we can avoid, and even how much more effectively we can deal with issues when they show up. So I want to talk today about, first of all, what happens when we don't feel listened to. There's a host of reactions in the brain, in the body, in our feelings when we feel like we're not getting listened to. And the funny part about this conversation is you're going to recognize most or all of this. One thing that happens when we don't feel listened to is we just start to get frustrated. Human beings need to communicate, and we need especially to be heard. If we're consistently not getting listened to, we're going to start to get frustrated. We may not identify quickly or even anytime soon that the problem is not getting listened to. We're still going to get frustrated. And that frustration will accumulate if we're not getting listened to again and again, either on a specific topic or on a variety of topics over time. A second thing that happens is we get anxious, we get stressed. There's this buildup makes us stressed and anxious. And again, we may not be sure what's going on, but we know that when this topic shows up or when these issues show up, we start to feel this kind of vague or sharp sense of discomfort, of anxiety, because we're not getting listened to. We can start to feel isolated. Not getting listened to tends to make us feel like we're pulling away from other people or that they're pulling away from us. And that's bad news. All these things are bad news, but that sense of isolation can feed back on itself. We can start to convince ourselves that he doesn't care, she doesn't care, this isn't working. All kinds of conversations can start as we feel that distance opening up between us. We can also get defensive and angry. There's a lot to say about this, but maybe in a nutshell, if we're not getting listened to, we can start to assume a defensive posture or position about that topic. We've tried to get heard, we've tried to get listened to, doesn't seem to be working. Now, even getting close to that topic makes us edgy, defensive. We're expecting to not be heard. Bad, very, very bad for communication. I've identified everything that can happen when we don't feel listened to, but those are 4 biggies. Those in turn take us to some pretty nasty behaviors in conversation or in conflict with our partners. And this is one of the reasons conflict gets a bad rap, because we're not getting listened to, then we start to do things or experience things in conflict that convince us even more that there's no point to this or it's never going to work or whatever. So one of the classic things that happens if you don't feel listened to is you begin to raise your voice. It's almost like your body is trying to get heard despite the other person. We're trying to talk over each other, or I'm getting louder. So we equate loudness with ease of being listened to. That's not crazy. It's also probably not very helpful for most of us. Some of us react very poorly to raised voices. We have our own bad histories of conflict in our families or other relationships. It means that someone's getting angry or it's becoming physically risky. So raised voices, one symptom. We can start swearing. Now, some couples don't care about swearing. Some couples can't imagine not swearing when they fight. But a number of people, a significant fraction of people, hear swearing as an attack and get more and more uncomfortable as swear words begin to get passed back and forth oh, pardon me, between partners. In that same direction, we can feel verbally attacked. We start using words like stupid or careless or thoughtless or whatever we're saying about our partner, because again, we're trying to get listened to. And now we're starting to move into territory that's meant to provoke the other person into a response. Even if we don't think it consciously, we've been communicating a long time as humans, we will begin to try to provoke a response. And some of that can come from attacks or insults or digs, and that can escalate to worse places. Now we're shouting, now we're swearing, now we're attacking each other. If we're not careful, that energy builds on itself. And I don't mean that in some mysterious, ooh way. Energy is coming from flight or fight. If we're in a conflict, we have begun to trigger, most of us, some sort of flight or fight response. Things are feeling risky. Well, this can go in even worse directions, like physical reactions. Now, hopefully that means you break a glass or throw a plate or slam a door, but it can also escalate to physical violence. And of course, the minute you cross that line, the rules change. Now you have violated another person's physical person, their space, you've attacked them, you've created all kinds of problems. But it's not crazy to see how it can get there, especially as frustration and anxiety build over time. I'm not excusing it even a little bit, but it's not like it happens in a vacuum. These things build on themselves. And we can also shut down. In some respects, as bad as physical violence is, most of us instead have a tendency just to close down, whether that's walking away or just not responding anymore because we've given up. It feels pointless. And we're afraid, we're stressed, we're frustrated, we're angry, so we just shut down. Isn't it amazing how many things can stem from just not getting listened to? This is why I say it's so important to put listening first. So, what happens when we do get listened to? Well, that's the great news in this conversation. Reflective listening in particular, listening for content as well as emotions and making sure that the speaker knows that you're paying attention, really listening, not just by saying, I heard you, but by summarizing back what you've heard, begins to de-escalate the person who's talking. It may not happen right away, but 2, 3, 4 efforts, and the message is becoming clear that you are listening. The other person all but can't help to begin to de-escalate. It's not going to fix everything magically, but it's going to start to create a way better, safer, smarter, more productive communication environment. The second thing happens, I start to feel listened. I'm way more likely to be listening myself. You've heard me, now I'm calming down, now I'm not as crazy. Okay, now I'm in a better place to hear you, which leads to another piece. If we feel listened to, depending on the context, we tend to be more patient, more forgiving. Okay, we got escalated, we got crazy, but now I'm feeling heard. And remember, this doesn't have to all be conscious. A lot of this is happening and we're not even aware that we're going through this. You can become aware, and that's a great thing. But these are just the benefits of getting listened to. We tend to feel more connected when we feel listened to. It's just, we're strengthening the communication connection between us, and that's emotional and psychological too. We tend to be more open to other viewpoints. We're escalated, it's my way or the highway. I'm de-escalated, I'm calmer, I'm feeling listened to. I'm likely to be more open to other possibilities. Again, these aren't always going to happen, but the likelihood goes up. And we even tend to take feedback better. What sounded like harsh criticism at the height of the fight now comes off as, hey, I wish you'd put the toilet seat down. Hey, I wish you'd put the toothpaste cap on the toothpaste tube. We're less likely to bristle and be defensive when we get that kind of feedback. Summary statement, listening is central. It's huge. It may be the most important thing you can do when it comes to working on a healthy relationship with your partner, and certainly when we're talking about communication. Thanks.